So you drove, what, 400 miles from Greenville, South Carolina to Wisconsin to participate. You spent hundreds of dollars to go to this. And you looked up all of the people you were competing against, at least the top ones, just to find out what your chances were and decided to go. So what happened?
Well, yes, I did just that. All of the athletes will look up the list of registrations, and then we can understand who's participating, look up their strengths and weaknesses. And Katherine Phillips, KJ, name was not on that list. And I checked it up all the way to the point of closure when we couldn't register online anymore. And they said there would be no more registrations allowed after that. So it was hidden from us. The other athletes like Julie, my friend who placed second, agreed that they did not see Katherine Phillips' name. So basically we came to compete. We found out after the race, that's when we found out that there had been another competitor we thought just added. But Julie spoke with one of the officials who confirmed that Katherine Phillips had been registered since, I want to say, June 16th.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So Julie Peterson, a female cyclist who had a championship stolen from her, is now speaking out. This was the woman who absolutely refused to stand on the podium next to this male athlete who we all believe should not be competing in a women's competition. And some may ask, well, why did she show up in the first place? Well, it appears USA Cycling, the organisers behind this event, didn't put this person's name on the list of competitors from very early on. Some of the women have come forward and said that if they had known that a male athlete was competing in this competition, they would never have entered into the competition in the first place. But after weeks of training, money and time invested into preparing for this event, it's very hard to then just walk away, especially when you have sponsors, when you drove 400 miles to even get there. And then on top of that, many of the women, if not all of them, weren't even aware until after the race had actually concluded. And yes, I believe this is a deliberate move from these sporting bodies to conceal these trans-identifying male athletes, to ensure that the numbers don't drop drastically. What other reason could there be for this person's name not being on the list like every other competitor? These cyclists usually look up each other to know who they're competing against, to know the strengths and weaknesses of their competitors. They look one another up. Even though this person's name is a female name, a Katherine Phillips, they still would have looked the person up and been aware that this person is indeed male. So I absolutely commend Julie Peterson for not standing on the podium, for protesting this travesty in the best way she knew how. They asked her why she didn't stand on the podium, and she said, because I don't want to compete against a man. Obviously, looking at the photos, it's as clear as day. But when somebody shows up with their helmet on and everything, it's not very obvious. But when it became obvious to Julie was not when the race had finished, it was during the race. She said, I could spot that this was a male sprint. I could spot it a mile off. Amazing how she could spot that. Because men and women are different. If you're used to competing against other women, you know how other women compete. If you've had experience competing against men, maybe in training or co-ed events, you know how men compete as well. Julie was like, I recognize a man's sprint finish when I see one. And if that doesn't tell you the differences between men and women, the obvious differences between men and women, I don't know what will. Imagine finding out during the race, while you're being overtaken, you're about to win, and then someone zooms by you, and you're like, that's a dude. The lack of courtesy towards these women, the lack of respect towards these women, we've seen it before. USA Cycling needs to do better. USA Cycling should be embarrassed, just like the other sporting bodies who were shamed into changing their policies recently, such as in fencing, gymnastics. They were so embarrassed when their policy was exposed, and when a light was shone on these ridiculous policies, they ended up changing them. Male cyclists have a larger limb segment mass. They may conserve momentum better than female cyclists, and they are likely to have greater rotating leg mass. Males have a significantly higher VO2 max, and their higher muscle mass mean that they can cycle with greater force and greater power. So when you're competing against a man and this person zooms by you with power that you've never seen a female cyclist perform before, it's obvious to those who know. A male can produce power between 5 seconds and 1 minute at a higher wattage than most female riders. So female cyclist Julie Peterson has defended her decision to take a stand against a transgender rival during a recent event. Peterson came second in a women's national championship race in Wisconsin last week after being beaten by KP Phillips, who was born a biological male. In response, Peterson refused to take the podium alongside Phillips and later insisted she did not want to race against a man. The statement, according to Peterson, drew shock from the fans in attendance, but now the veteran cyclist has defended her actions on the day. So both Julie and Debbie Mill, who was the race leader at the time, were overtaken by KJ in the final sprint.
So we're going to back it up to the final sprint where Debbie Milne was clearly going to win the race. I was second on her wheel. She was the race leader to watch. And out of nowhere came third place, KJ, and beat us both in the sprint. Unfortunately, Debbie was relegated to 7th place, different circumstance. And after the race, I was angry because I knew what had happened. I've raced thousands of races against women, and not thousands, 100 races against women, thousands against in group rides, sprinting against men. And I knew at that sprint that that was a man's sprint. And at the finish line, I was upset. I said I did not want to race against a man, and the whole audience just went, oh, like I shouldn't have said that. And in my mind, I'm like, I can say that. I have freedom of speech. I was raised believing in the Bible where men are created by God and God created women from men. I was born and raised in America where I learned my pronouns, and I took science classes that taught me about XX and XY. And I believe that most Americans and people worldwide would support men not being in women's categories.
Wow, I love it. I love it. She did not mince her words. Okay, I guess the word man is taboo to certain groups because she just said it. She didn't even try and say biological male or whatever euphemisms we use. She just said, I don't want to compete against a man. This isn't right. The crowd either gasped because were they not aware as well that this was a man? Because the cyclists weren't aware. So it wouldn't surprise me if there were many in the crowd who were unaware until the last minute, until they actually saw the person without the helmet and everything. And others, many of us are guilty of this, we've been conditioned where we can't say that this person is a man. The fact that she actually said it shocked the crowd. Good for her. This is absolutely wonderful to see. We need to see more of this. This is what is going to affect change. We saw in USA Fencing, Stephanie Turner's actions got them to change their policy. Simone Biles got gymnastics, USA Gymnastics, to change their policy. I'm sure she didn't intend for her actions to lead to a policy change, but who would have thought?
There's no amount of makeup, money, or marketing that can change that Y chromosome, and that's why we're taking a stand. I was able to look at the race start for the people who had registered, and this person's name was not on Bike Reg riders registration list, and which means we were not given the information that he would be racing in our category before the race started.
Yeah.
And USA Cycling's transgender policy doesn't require the male athletes to suppress their testosterone or anything like that. Not that that would make them a woman, but you know, there's nothing like that that's required. This is just a man walking into the women's category and taking a medal. It's as simple as that. How on earth is there any justification for this? The male athlete is well aware that he has an advantage over the females. The women know it. Anybody with any sense knows this. If Usain Bolt was to walk over into the women's athletics and start competing in the 100 meters against women, everybody would have something to say about it. But when a man declares himself to identify as trans, apparently that unfairness doesn't exist anymore. And USA Cycling has no justification for allowing this in the first place. And not only that, but luring the women into competitions under false pretenses. Where in their policy does it say that they conceal the fact that male athletes are competing in the women's category? Where does it say that in their policy that they have the right to do that? At least there should be transparency when it comes to these things.
That their gender identity is female. So you just have to simply say that you identify as female, no matter your gender, and this is a biological man that you had to compete against that took the top spot on the podium. All that person had to just say is identify as female.
Absolutely. And I actually have a photo of the registration that was done on June 18th at 4:48 p.m. And so they had plenty of time to get it on the rider registration
Who do you
form.
think was hiding it?
And USA Cycling and Bike Reg. It's been happening since 2023.
The women specifically asked the question, will there be a transgender in my category? She didn't go into detail because they didn't have time, but she said the female athletes specifically asked that question.
And women email USA Cycling specifically asking the question, will there be a transgender in my category?
And they were still not given that information. This is direct discrimination against women, against these female cyclists. There's no denying that. They're not even given the choice to walk away and say, I don't want to compete in this particular event. It's absolutely shocking. So I hope enough pressure can be put on these sporting bodies to put an end to this, to stop perpetuating this injustice against female athletes. The female athletes deserve better, and I'm tired of hearing this, quite frankly. Male athletes are allowed to compete in the women's category by just declaring that their identity is that of a female. Whereas the women who say that they don't want to compete against a male athlete, the women who say that this isn't fair, that this isn't right, their words are completely ignored. How does that make any sense whatsoever? How is that fair and just? To take the word of a man who says that I identify as a female, to take that as meaning that this person is a female and then can compete in the women's category, but to ignore the words of the women who say that I don't want to compete against a man, I do not consent to this, this is not fair and safe sports. Those words are ignored by these sporting bodies. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. But it's encouraging to see women like Debbie Mill, women like Julie Peterson, who are speaking out about this. At least they've been given a platform to do that. Certainly not by USA Cycling. So let's keep applying the pressure and hope that USA Cycling will follow suit along with the other sporting bodies who have recently changed their policies. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves and God willing, I will see you in the next video.